Hey, it's the Sustainable Ministry Show, episode number 6. He travels by horse and buggy. All right, so we're back, you guys. Last week we spent some time talking about Sabbath, and this week we're going to talk about balconies a little bit. And once again, we've got Nate Stuckey, Melissa Rao, and the Brent Parker with us. So before we get started, what is something that you guys just wish you could be doing right now if you weren't doing this?
Finishing my sandwich.
But you are doing that.
That's right.
I'll tell you what I'd be doing.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Melissa, really.
No, I'd be on a cruise. I would be on a balcony on the outside of ship, just listening to the ocean and sitting back and relaxing. That's what I'd be doing.
I'll tell you what I'd be doing. I think I would be at home, and I'd be changing my shirt because I think last week I wore this thing for the podcast.
Yeah, it's weird that we're all in the same outfits.
It is so strange.
Wow. But good for you for pointing that out, Nate.
Yeah. Now I'm self-conscious about it. Anyway, sorry.
It really looks nice, Nate. Draws out your eyes.
Thank you.
If you take your glasses off, I could see it even better.
There
Wow.
we go. It's very professor-ish of you.
Thank you.
And as probably nerdy and dorky as it sounds, I'm really super excited about the new Star Wars movie. If I could do anything right now, it would be sitting there watching that instead of this. But since I can't do that, I'm thrilled to be with you guys.
Thanks, bro.
Yeah. glad to support and encourage you. So somebody described to us balconies. What do we talk about when we talk about taking some balcony time?
Well, all right, I'll go in there. I'll jump in there. I like looking at the illustration of being in a factory. You know, like let's say we're in a clothing factory and there's lots of sewing machines going on. People are sewing, but then you've got this like wraparound balcony where the foreman or whatnot are walking around looking down on everybody doing the work. I think that's kind of what balcony time is about. It's pulling out of the work that you're doing to be able to look down and consider what might be going great, what might be pressure points, what might be doing what I'm like all tongue tied today. What we might be doing better, etc. And that's what balcony time's all about.
Melissa, I thought you were gonna go with like, you know, it's a factory. There's people sewing things all over the place, and then you know you go up to the balcony that has the thing, and you look down. And when you go up to the next level, you look down and you can actually see like this pattern of what is actually being formed by all people at their different sewing machines. You can't see that if you're always down on the floor just hanging out with the sewing machines, but you go up and then all of a sudden, I don't know if that actually could work, but I kind of like that. Anyway, that's what I got.
There you go.
Yeah, building on it, it's when we step back to work on the sewing business rather than down on the floor in the sewing business.
Yeah.
That looks a little different.
Yeah.
Brent, were you going to speak up a minute ago?
I was just thinking that when I picture a balcony, I picture being the part of the house where you're farthest away from the work and you're farthest away from danger, which then led my sort of ADD mind to this thought of we were at our staff retreat and it was in Florida at a beach house. And I was thinking as I drove by there, a month ago or so, that if the storm is rising, you head to the balcony. And it's this place where the potential dangers of life, the things that are going to potentially cause you harm, kind of drive you to this place of balcony. And as much as I'd like to think that most of our healthy youth pastors just choose to go to the balcony because it's that time in the rhythmic week. Many times we find ourselves in the balcony because the demands, the things that have become too difficult, they drive us up to the balcony to find our safe space. And so intentionally, I think it's what Melissa and Nate are saying, and unintentionally, I think I've more often found myself in the balcony as a result of trying to get away from work that was overwhelming me, getting away from the daily demands, the things that were really causing stress and anxiety for me.
I also think, too, it's the place for strategizing. So it's the place you're able to pull out and really consider what you're looking down upon and what might be coming up ahead, and figuring out what you need to do in order to adjust your work to, say, meet a goal or hit that next benchmark, etc. So it's really strategizing and figuring out ways to, I guess, adjust your course in order to meet where you want to go. I think it's also a time where it's pouring back into you vocationally. So it's very different than Sabbath. Sabbath is resting, but this is about strategizing and becoming better for yourself and the ministry you might be serving, or any role you might be serving as a leader.
Yeah, I think if Sabbath is sort of stepping away from setting the work aside to gain perspective in that way, the balcony time changes perspective by actually sort of stepping into the work in a new way from a new place, and looking at the big picture and the perspectives, and what do you see when you go up to the balcony that you can't see when you're down, in the pews. And so, it's just to affirm, it's different than Sabbath. It's an entry into, as opposed to a stepping away from, but in a way that helps alter the perspective and look at the big picture stuff.
Yeah. Well, just some very literal, tangible ways. I think we did another video once where I was sitting in a balcony in my sanctuary, and I was looking down because literally I noticed that when we had big events, when the floor was full, everybody who wanted a good photo or a good video vantage point, some way to make sure they captured all of the details of the things that were happening in the service, they'd head up to the balcony, and that's the best vantage point where they could view their sweet little thing singing at the front. I also find that in churches, it's not uncommon for ushers, when they're counting the heads of folks in their worship experience, they head to the balcony where they have the much better vantage point. They can see everybody from the top. So that balcony is that place where you kind of get away, create some space, and you get a much better visual of what's going on around you.
Yeah, and especially like with the group photo, every time there's a group photo and you step back to look at it afterwards, you're always like, oh my gosh, look at so-and-so, or look what was going on over here. Or look at the face they were making, you'll always see something different at that point when you do that. So, like, what are the questions we should be asking ourselves when we take some balcony time? What are the things that you find yourself evaluating when you do that?
I think just what is the state of affairs? What's going on? What's coming up next week? What's coming up next month? We talk oftentimes, Brent has mentioned it now twice about weekly rhythm. And when you have a good weekly rhythm, it means you're maybe a better time manager than others. Unfortunately, though, sometimes we forget balcony time. And if you don't have balcony time in your weekly rhythm, then it might be hard for you to adjust for what might be coming down the pike, and maybe even the immediate future. When we're running programs or we're making plans to have an event, or you're doing something special, sometimes we do have to adjust our rhythms in order to live into or lean into that next event that might be coming down the pike. So just for a practical sense, for your weekly rhythm and your time management, balcony time is super important.
Yeah, and I think it's a lot about priorities, and that's the time where there's the critical distance from the immediate demanding tasks or whatever. You say, all right, as far as the big picture beyond this week and this day, what are the priorities, and am I going to make sense of my time in a way that reflects those priorities or not? So that's I think important for the balcony piece.
And also, we were making a connection to Sabbath a little bit earlier. Melissa and Nate were that it's sort of like Sabbath, but it's not a break away from things, but rather a step into a different vantage point. And one of the things I was thinking of as they were talking was this idea that a mentor shared with me once, the idea that if you're doing anything in your ministry right now that someone else could be doing just as well or better than you, then you should probably let them do it. And that's one of the things you can sort of ascertain when you're up in the balcony, is you can take a look at all the ministry programs that you have going on, the big goals that you have up in the future, and begin to identify, where am I caught up in the work of the factory that's actually slowing down the work process, the workflow. Maybe if I stepped away and plugged this person into the workflow, it would actually be going more smoothly. So it's a place to kind of figure out where could volunteers step in as well, to create more space for me to have future balcony time and Sabbath time in the future.
So I have a question. Am I allowed to ask a question, Bryant? Is that okay?
Let me check the sources here. Yep, I think so.
Oh, good. Okay. So my question is this. So I know that I think actually Brent and Melissa and I are all have all navigated transitions recently within the last year or two. Well, and Bryant, you have also. I'm curious, how would you all talk about the difference in balcony time, say after you've been in a ministry for 4, 5, 6, 10 years, versus balcony time as you begin something new? Because it seems like maybe, I think the principles may be the same, but the perspective might be a little different. So I'm curious how you all would reflect on that.
And the thing that really kind of piques my interest now, the church I'm at, I've been there for about 2 years, and getting there, you don't have, if you're doing some kind of rhythm of stepping back to really look at the ministry, you have a history that you've been evaluating and working towards, and setting new goals for yourself. And when you first made that transition, at least for me, when I first made that transition, I didn't have the history. I didn't know the culture of the church and the ministry. I didn't know what it was that they've been working toward and that sort of thing. And so kind of stepping back to look at it landed me with more questions about the work that we were doing in the church and what was going on programmatically, and what was going on even relationally within the ministry. It really landed me with more questions to evaluate in the future weeks than it did really with kind of doing any sort of goal setting, or even the ability to evaluate the values that were being displayed within the church and in the ministry. And that, so for me, that was a huge distinct difference, not having the background to really be able to evaluate.
Mm-hmm.
I would say just quickly that to answer your question, Nate, I picture the community I've moved to. We've this new church. We've sort of set our vision as being a church with a front porch, and so I've been picturing big houses with big front porches and balcony up second level porches. And so to use that same illustration for you, in the ministry that I had been in, I found myself more often in the back side of the house balcony, looking down on people and programs that I had already secured. Folks who were already into the backyard fence. They were safe. They had been welcomed into my space. They weren't going anywhere. It felt safe to be back there. And now I find myself as if I'm on the balcony in the front of the house, where I'm watching people come up the drive, determining these new relationships. Who can I trust? Who can I not trust? Sort of a clean slate. Nobody's in the backyard yet, so we don't know what kind of programming we're going to need yet. Just sort of welcoming. It's changed from my current balcony time as a place of hospitality and of hope and of wonder, of expectation. There's this favorite verse I've got rumbling around my head these days out of Habakkuk, completely out of context, but Habakkuk and the Lord are in this conversation, and Habakkuk, like all prophets, are complaining. God, when are you going to show up? When are you going to do what you said you were going to do? And the Lord says to Habakkuk, says, look at the nations and be amazed and be astonished. For what I'm going to do in your lifetime, you wouldn't believe, even if you were told. Right? And so I find myself in this current balcony, trying to keep myself alive to expectation of something greater than I could have ever imagined, wondering who might show up at my front steps, somebody that I may have never met before or never expected to show. So that's kind of a difference in the balconies experience.
I'd like to add another thing too, is often overlooked. Many times in our positions, balcony time is overlooked for personal edification. And so, and it's not just personal edification, but vocational edification, if you will. So, all too often people will say, oh, I need to read this book for work. And they'll do that during their Sabbath time. But in fact, it's best reserved for balcony time. You know, reading the latest blog posts, articles, magazine clips, or a book. We need to do that in order to become better at our ministries. And as a program staff person, we need to then take that information and then share nuggets of wisdom with our volunteers. And so reading is a great thing to do during balcony time, and it should be scheduled during balcony time and not during your time off or away from the office.
That's a great point, Melissa.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Nate.
No, I just was complimenting everything else.
Well, you know, the other thing that kind of stirs in me too, just listening to y'all speak, really, as we had talked previously about Sabbath and now even about balcony time, that both of these are things that are easy to kind of let go of and let slide from our schedules. And so even 5 minutes of time for these things is important if you're starting from zero. And if you're starting at 1 hour, to be able to extend that to 2 or 3, they're so crucial to the ministry. They're crucial to, I think, our own livelihood, and crucial to the ministry. And they're things. We just lost Melissa. They're both of them are things that will impact the ministry long term. They'll impact the people that we work with and the people that we serve. But I think that's also why it's so easy to let it slide. Is you take some balcony time, you don't see the effect this Sunday in worship,
right?
But you do 6 months from now, and you neglect your Sabbath. You don't see that this week, but you'll begin to feel it pretty quickly, you know. And so that's a piece that's really hard. I think that if you're not doing any of it, just start small, and start building on that.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was saying it's just interesting that Scripture persistently takes the long view, and so there's this rhythm in the Old Testament about I'm the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, and so this look way back, and then also like this notion that the things that we do have impacts for our children and our children's children and up to these generations and generations. And I think that there is something that connects. We want to keep the distinction between balcony time, Sabbath time, but I think both of them are practices in taking the long view, and I think there's something very rich about that, and something that can be actually very life-giving, and can provide a sense of direction, a compass for us when the daily grind of the tasks that need to be accomplished day to day can actually blind us to that long view in a way that can actually be pretty paralyzing. So I think it's the grace of the long view.
Yeah, think about the other scripture that you're probably going to next is, you think about this time of year especially, with Mary being told, hey, you're going to be the parent of the Savior of the world, and instead of being scared out of her wits, she was just a little interested. What's that about? But then it goes straight to her song, and her song is this chorus of, God, you did this, you did that, you were there when that happened, you were there when that happened, and we can trust you. I can trust you with where things are headed because of all the ways you've been there before. Again, that long view that Nate's talking about. I think that's interesting. And of course, we're talking about balcony time, which is a concept that Mark DeVries brought out in Sustainable Youth Ministry, unashamedly trying to describe a concept that may be completely obscure to folks who aren't familiar with him and his work. But for me, to throw in another obscure piece that you'd have to read to know about, is we have this thing called the preventative maintenance calendar. And I remember early on when I was trying to figure out what to do in balcony time, well, you pull out your preventative maintenance calendar and you once a month stop and say, what's next month? What volunteers do I need for next month? What event do I need to publicize? It, and so anyway, if you jump on in, get the book and read about balcony time, you're going to find yourself going to preventative maintenance calendar, and it'll all start to make sense. Trust us.
Well, you know what? And since I'm somewhat of the natural cynic, I would just add too that without balcony time, we are not effectively setting ourselves up to be the expert in our church. And I know that sounds a little vain, but it's really not. It's about, why is the church paying you? And I would say most people in paid positions should have specific skills and expertise in equipping and encouraging others to do the work of God, to be the hands and feet, and to be the saints, And so in order to do that effectively, we need to take balcony time to become better ourselves so that we can then help others become better. So I really think that that's really at the heart of balcony time, is how are we looking forward? How are we becoming better? And how is our ministry positioning itself to lean into the call that God has given us to be in the ministries in which we're serving?
I love it. Well, why don't we wrap up the conversation there? And I know you guys shared this last week, but where can people follow up with you?
You can reach out to me at Melissa@ministryarchitects.com. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Facebook. Some version of Melissa Rao in all of those different things. And I'd be happy to connect with y'all.
And the easiest way, snapshot it, screenshot it, snapshot it, Insta-vid it. I think that's a word that I heard recently. Pretty much, Brent, can you see that? Insta-vid? Brent at Ministry Architects would be a good email, or any of the contacts at my church. Facebook, Twitter, of course, the same.
And here's my stuff there, if that's legible. So any of that, or Farminary at ptsam.edu, or Google Farminary, or call Brent instead.
Hey, and I'll refer you to Nate. If you want to find Nate, just call me. He's a Mennonite. He travels by horse and buggy. You can catch him pretty quick.
That's right.
Yeah, the fast horse.
So the easiest way to get in touch with Nate is by contacting Brent. And if you want to get in touch with Brent, just follow up with Nate. He'll get you connected. And I'm Bryant Johnson.
Everybody's going to be calling Melissa, so we've just saved ourselves.
Melissa has yet to publish her phone number. But I'm Bryant, and we have enjoyed this conversation and sharing our thoughts with you. Bryant at ministryarchitects.com, or you can find me on Facebook, facebook.com/Bryant Johnson. We'll see you guys later.
Ha 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 ha.